Hello and welcome to another episode of Sensational She-Geek live from Yancy Street. My name is Anna and thank you very much for tuning in this week. It is Monday, February 8th, 2021, and as it is a Monday, it is episode 4A, and I will be talking about comics in pop culture and other media. And then I'll also be going over some of this week's comics, spotlighting some representation among the releases, and then I also have some other news topics that are just general comics news and updates. So we can go ahead and get started here. Thank you once again for listening to my podcast. If it is easier, it is also linked on Apple Podcasts, Podbean, and YouTube, as well as my site through all of those services. We'll start with the big seller of the week, of course, the comics in pop culture and media. We'll go through WandaVision Episode 5, the trailer for Falcon and the Winter Soldier, which premiered last night at the Super Bowl, some rumors about Spider-Man 3 that have been kind of going around for a while now. I'll briefly touch on some things in Snowpiercer Season 2 and some things from the comic. I'll talk a little bit about Resident Alien, which is another show on Sci-Fi, which comes from a comic origin, Dark Horse Comics. And then it's been 1 year since Harley Quinn and the Birds of Prey, so I have to give that a shout out as well. We'll go ahead and get started here with WandaVision Episode 5. Of course, there was a big episode. A lot of the internet is still freaking out about that and hasn't gotten over the big reveals and news and everything that we got in that episode. Of course, it ends. Spoilers. Don't listen to this if you don't want spoilers. Spoilers. Pietro shows up at the end, but the thing is, it's not Aaron Taylor Johnson's Pietro who we saw in Age of Ultron. It's Evan Peters' Pietro who we saw in the Fox-Men movies. Fox-Men being the just casual term for the X-Men movies that were made by Fox, as opposed to WandaVision, which is being made by Disney Marvel. So, big deal that it showed up to be the Fox-Men Pietro, because you basically just have multiverses confirmed, kind of again, in the MCU. It was sort of teased in Spider-Man Far From Home. We had the fake Mysterio coming in and saying that he was Mysterio, but he was coming in and saying that there was all these multiverses, but of course that was fake. We know that there are going to be a lot more multiverses that we see and hear about and learn about, and of course that's going to be headed much more in Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness, second Doctor Strange film, which we'll also be seeing Mephisto in, which will come into key in this WandaVision talk a little bit later. So, having multiverses kind of confirmed here, and especially having the fact that that Fox-Men universe was kind of just confirmed as its own multiverse of legitimate X-Men, just kind of a different one than this one we're seeing at the MCU, that's a big deal. And of course, the theories that are spinning from that are pretty much that the consensus is basically Wanda has pulled Pietro from the wrong universe, or someone has pulled Pietro from the wrong universe because that's the universe where he's alive. Or it's possible that he's Mephisto, or he's someone else trying to pull one over on Wanda, or he's not even real. It's all still possibilities. Literally anything can happen when we're talking about Wanda's chaos magic, or whatever they're calling it in the MCU. Another theory that is kind of intriguing and I like to kind of think about is that her boys did it. Of course, we saw her boys aging up from being babies to 5-year-olds to 10-year-olds. And as 10-year-olds, they asked about their uncle Pietro. And Wanda kind of just says that he's very far away right now. I don't think she really wants to go into any of that. And then, of course, later on that night, there he is. So it's possible that the twins, subconsciously or not, pulled their Uncle Pietro through from the wrong universe because they wanted their mother to be happy and to meet him themselves. There's also the possibility that Agnes is involved somehow. Of course, Agnes being the character from the comics Agatha Harkness. She was one of the key characters who were left out of the episode for Who Is Everybody Really Inside the Dome? We'll call it the Dome, the neighborhood dome. I'm starting to believe that was, while with Dottie, I don't think that's going to matter really who she is. She hasn't come back since we first saw her. With Agnes, she's definitely important. There's no way they're just putting in Wanda's best witch friend from the comics just as a coincidence. And of course my theory from that being she is working with Mephisto. It's not my theory, and I'll do credit. I saw it on Twitter. I don't know whose theory it was, but it was just something that somebody else said that they saw, and I think that's awesome. Agnes working with Mephisto would make a lot of sense because she's been talking about her husband this whole time. We have yet to see a husband or a house. I think that Agnes possibly was sent to Wanda's bubble neighborhood to figure out what she's up to, and that's why she's staying so close to Wanda, and that would also possibly explain why Agnes is the only character in the show who has had the moment of kind of breaking the fourth wall and speaking to Wanda like she's in charge of all this, and she knows she's in charge of all this. We had a moment, she walks into the house and wants to see the babies, and Wanda says no, and Agnes doesn't know how to respond, and she goes, do you want me to start from the top? Do you want me to start from the top? Should I go back outside and knock on the door? You know, she's talking about starting over the scene like this is from a script. And Vision gets really thrown off by this, and Wanda gets kind of shocked herself by this. But I think she just wasn't expecting somebody from her neighborhood to have that kind of fourth wall breaking moment. And then she just kind of shakes her head, shakes it off of her, and says, oh yes, of course you can say hi to the kids, whatever. It's definitely clear that Agnes has a step up in some way from the other occupants of the neighborhood and the town. She seems to have better control of herself, and as we've seen in this one scene, definitely has some kind of higher level of consciousness. And I definitely think it's tied to Mephisto, or it's possible that she is just some other, I don't know, character from Wanda's life, or person who just happened to... I refuse to believe that Agatha Harkness just happens to be in Wanda's neighborhood. And she's there on purpose, and I cannot wait to see why. There is also the theory I saw this morning about Wanda being possessed by a character from back in the day, the comics, some Avengers 157 or something like that, way back when. The character's name is like Cthulhu or something weird. It's not Cthulhu. It's Ctho or something weird like that. But the character, I guess, possessed Wanda for a time. I would really like to see Disney Marvel avoid possession stories if at all possible. We know that they already did that with Hawkeye, sort of, to an extent. We don't need to see that again. Possession stories, like I've mentioned in the one of the previous episodes of this podcast, possession and body swapping stories have a very toxic history in comics. They can be done correctly, but odds are they're usually not done correctly. They're usually done in a way that is harmful to the character and sends a bad message, and it's just never really, in my opinion, the best option to do a body swap possession story, whichever way it goes. It's just kind of a lazy route. I still think that this is Wanda completely losing her shit. Now remember, in the comics, Wanda, the Avengers were going to kill Wanda before she even initiated House of M. So if we're talking about WandaVision as our House of M kind of event in the MCU, there's, you know, these theories going around where people think that there is this other villain now who's controlling things, where Wanda's saying to Vision, oh, I'm not doing this. She's lying to Vision, okay? She's controlling everything, even if she doesn't realize it. She's lying to Vision. The Avengers in the comics were going to kill Wanda before House of M even happened, because she had already killed Hawkeye, used Vision's body to blow up the Avengers Mansion, and make the world think that Tony Stark and himself had fallen off the wagon. And you know, of course, Tony Stark's whole Demon in a Bottle storyline, that would be a big friggin' deal if he had fallen off the wagon, especially at the UN, the way that she had him do, kind of, sort of. It was her chaos magic, he wasn't actually falling off the wagon. Point being, she went berserk long before House of M ever happened, and House of M was all of reality switched to be basically in her father's image. And that, we are just kind of touching on the strength of Wanda, I think, in this. We saw her coming out of the bubble in this episode 5. She gets, you know, her kind of more red hair back. She's in her Avengers suit, and she looks like a boss-ass bitch, and I'm so here for it. Comes out and kind of threatens the director of S.W.O.R.D., who I still think is a Skrull, and talks to Monica a little bit. Now, that was a really cool scene, and I feel like definitely we're just touching on the seams of what Wanda's actual power level is in this, and I don't think she even really is aware of what she's doing quite to the extent that she's doing it. But I want to talk about Monica, because we saw a couple of things that's interesting with Monica this week. Darcy told Monica early on in the episode that she's a really big fan. Now, does that mean that she has her powers already? I think I had mentioned before how, in a previous episode, how I had originally thought maybe Monica had her powers because she approaches that force field on the outside of the town, and the camera, it was kind of odd. It was hard to tell if it was a camera angle, which allowed us to see the force field clearer than from Wu's perspective further back, or if we were being shown what Monica can see as opposed to what Wu can see. Monica can see, of course, all different kinds of spectrum of light and waves and whatnot. That's her power in the comics. I assume they would do something similar in the MCU. So if she does have her power, that could have been her seeing the force field in a way that nobody else could, and that could also then again be Darcy telling Monica she's a big fan of her hero efforts. That does bring up the question of why haven't the Avengers known about her? There was the whole 5-year period she was gone, yes, but if she was already a hero, she had to have been a hero before that then. Which would bring up, why didn't they know about her before that? It's maybe S.W.O.R.D. was in league with her and they didn't want the Avengers to know about her. They wanted her in their back pocket. Could be because they still haven't utilized her to her full capabilities then, if that's the case. And so I think they're saving that for when they really, really need her to pull out her big trump card. And of course, that's all assuming she does have the powers. If she doesn't have the powers, it's definitely possible that Darcy is just a massive dork and thinks that, you know, people who work for S.W.O.R.D. are really cool, and she knows that this is the captain of whatever at S.W.O.R.D., and she just thinks that she's a fan of her. That's also very possible. We know Darcy is a massive dork, and that's why we love her. It's kind of also cool. I wanted to bring up the very, very, very brief moment that we had of Captain Marvel being mentioned. Monica has a right to be resentful of Carol Danvers, and we do see that here. Somebody mentions just briefly in passing the name Captain Marvel, and you see Monica get tense and immediately flare up with anger. She has a right to feel like that. Now let's go over this timeline. I wrote it down because it's a bit complicated. Now see if you can follow this, okay? Here's her relationship and her mother's relationship, Maria, with Carol Danvers, Captain Marvel. Carol disappeared in the 90s when Monica was a little kid. We saw that in the movie Captain Marvel, when she returned later in the 90s, promising never to disappear again. She disappears again until she's called back at the end of end credits scene in Infinity War, and then we see her in Endgame helping the scrabbly Avengers, what's left of them. After Endgame, she goes off into space to solve, or I guess during Endgame, she's off in space solving their post-snap problems. There was that comment, you know, she made in Endgame about the problems you're seeing here on Earth aren't just happening here, they're happening everywhere. That's what she was doing for those 5 years. So, while she's gone, Maria dies alone. Monica was snapped. Maria dies alone. We'll just say that twice because it's big. Carol comes back at the end of Endgame to fight Thanos, and ... We don't really know what happens after that. She goes to the funeral of Tony Stark or whoever it was, and I guess just never goes back to see if Monica's there or if Maria's still alive, which she's not. So we have to assume that Carol kind of just after the scene in Captain Marvel just never went back to her best friend Maria and her daughter Monica, who she promised she would never leave again. We can go into how Maria was designed very poorly as a character in Captain Marvel the film, and I'm glad that they're doing Monica so much better already. She looks fantastic, she is an excellent actress, and she is characterized exactly the way that I want her to be. There's a panel from her first appearance, and I really love the panel. It's the Romitas Jr. and Senior are drawing Monica holding a mug with her name all over it, and it's just a little smirk she has on, but I really would love to see this actress kind of do a little throwback to the origin issue of Monica drawn by the Romitas. Point being of all that, Monica does not like Captain Marvel, and we can see that she has a great reason why. Carol basically abandoned them twice. The second time after promising she was never going to do it again and leave, and that made Monica kind of forced her to leave her mother to die alone. She couldn't help that she was snapped. Carol was there available to check in on Maria after Monica was snapped, and we have to assume she never did. That's definitely something that's going to come up in Captain Marvel 2, who we already know Monica is going to be in that movie. Carol is going to be in that movie. and Kamala Khan is going to be in that movie as well. So we're going to have 3 Marvels, and I'm very excited to see who walks away with what title in that movie, especially based on, ooh, you think we're going to get Monica slapping Captain Marvel when they first meet for the first time in the modern era? Oh, that would be beautiful. I'm sorry, but like, I want to see them hash this out. Carol screwed her over, and I want to see them hash this out. I think that covers everything from WandaVision. It was a big episode, and there is a lot to take from it. If you have thoughts on it, let me know. I think I covered most of the theories that I've seen. I guess the one that I actually didn't miss, here we go. Lady Loki is a theory as well. I don't know how solid this is, but of course you have the Loki's TV series that's starting, I think, at the beginning of next year, or possibly later this year. But it's Lady Loki is confirmed to be in that. I believe they cast her as her own character, as opposed to taking her origin of being Loki possessing Sif. Thank you once again. Let's not do the possession stuff. We can avoid that by writing better. So if Lady Loki pops up, that'd be pretty cool. I still have my very extremely mild theory that Clea is Dottie. Dottie is Clea. Dottie being the neighborhood meeting lady from episode 2. But she hasn't come up since then, so I'm probably wrong. But you can always wish. And then Falcon and Winter Soldier is starting right as soon as WandaVision is ending. So it's also kind of safe to say that we might see some characters from that in this, or possibly in this, in that. Possibly Monica in Falcon and the Winter Soldier. That wouldn't quite make as much sense. But if Sword pops up, we might see some repeating characters. Now, speaking of Falcon and the Winter Soldier, we just saw, I believe, what was the first official trailer for that, released last night. They put a little teaser of it up for the Super Bowl and then released the full thing online, as is kind of tradition these days. It premieres in mid-March, which is basically right when WandaVision ends. I think WandaVision ends. Let me check my calendar here. I'm actually checking my calendar. WandaVision ends, yes, it ends on the 12th of March, and I believe Falcon and the Winter Soldier starts the very next week on the 19th of March. So, it's very possible that we get a exit from one show as an entrance into the other. The types of shows that we'll be getting are obviously going to be extremely different, and you can see that even before the trailer came out. You can have made that assumption very easily. We're going to get more of a spy thing in this versus I'm not even sure what you want to call WandaVision. It's half sitcom and the other half is, just whatever it is. But Falcon and the Winter Soldier is obviously going to be a very different show from that, following very much in the lines of the films we've seen these two characters in, like Civil War and The Winter Soldier. So that's very exciting. We can definitely expect it to be a bit of a buddy cop style movie, or show, and a bit of a rivalry style show. The dynamic between the two characters, it seems they're going to be pretty accurate to the comics, where they're working together, they want to be friends. They're going to end up being friends a lot closer, obviously, than the beginning, but it's going to be a little bit of a rough start because their histories with the thing that ties them together, being Captain America, are very different. You have the one who was his savior when Steve was a young kid and then grew up together, and Steve wanted to join the army because of him. And then you have the one who was a vet when he met Steve, and Steve was already a legend who had come out of the ice, and Bucky was nothing but a myth kind of at that point. And their dynamics with Steve were very different, and we did get that nod from Bucky at Endgame when he passes off the shield to Falcon instead of Winter Soldier. So it'll be interesting to see that dynamic. There's going to be a little bit of, I think, based on some of the shots in the trailer, a little bit of, I can do this better than you, even though he wanted you to do it. Just know that I can do it better than you. That's a little bit of the vibe that I'm getting from the Winter Soldier in that trailer. Now we'll go through some of the other things. Of course, we know Agent 13 and Zemo, Baron Zemo, are going to be big characters in this. Agent 13 being an ally, and Baron Zemo being the main villain of the series, as far as we know. I think it was actually about a week ago, they confirmed that Don Cheadle will be appearing in Falcon and the Winter Soldier as War Machine. So that's pretty cool. We can imagine that he's probably going to be coming in here to try and settle whatever problems they cause by being chaotic partners. And the other theory that I have on that is it's possible that his upcoming live-action show Armor Wars is going to spin out of something that Bucky and Falcon mess up in Falcon and the Winter Soldier. So we'll kind of see if any of that has any legitimacy to it. Apparently there has also been confirmed that Echo, Maya Lopez, will appear in Falcon and the Winter Soldier. She's a hero in her own right as Echo, but she has also appeared before as Ronin, and that was in the Brian Michael Bendis New Avengers 2005 era. She was Ronin, and that is probably, it's rumored that they might go in that direction because, you know, Hawkeye was Ronin in Endgame, so maybe they're going to continue that trail of handing off the Ronin mask. And who knows, maybe we're going to have a Blade movie in a few years. Who knows, maybe they're going to pass that off to Blade after his first movie too, because Blade was Ronin very famously for a very long time. Further rumors include, well, Echo was confirmed, but further rumors include Ricky Barnes appearing as Bucky Barnes' granddaughter. Ricky Barnes officially first appeared, that had been in the 90s, and she was the Heroes Reborn version of Bucky Barnes. Now, I'll talk a little bit later about Heroes Reborn because they're kind of doing it again for some reason, but they gave Rob Liefeld his own Marvel universe, and if you know anything about Rob Liefeld, you can already see why that was a problem. He's not a very good writer. He's not a very good artist either, and that's kind of what he does. But it was this like crossover thing where they mashed up characters and gender swapped characters, and it's generally thought of as like a failure of an event from the 90s, as were several others. But Ricky Barnes being rumored to appear as Bucky Barnes' granddaughter instead of the gender-swapped Bucky Barnes from Heroes Reborn. It's kind of cool. We'll see if that pans out to be anything. One confirmation we already know, and I'm sure everybody already knows this isn't really news, John Walker will be appearing in the show as U.S. Agent, who is, if you've seen pictures of what looks like an off-brand Captain America running around, like they just kind of made him out of Play-Doh instead of out of marble. That's U.S. Agent, and he's basically gonna be the let's say the wannabe Captain America who they put out to try and like use as propaganda and stuff. So that'll be probably very honestly political. There is a man, Carl Lumbly, has been cast in Falcon and the Winter Soldier. His role is unknown, and the theories are that he is either Blue Marvel, who is a big character in Marvel Comics, he's a black scientist who is also a superhero. He's one of the smartest people in the world, in the universe. Or he could be Isaiah Bradley, and I kind of like this one a little better, no matter how much I want Blue Marvel to appear, so we can get Ultimates, because Isaiah Bradley was the first Captain America. He was a black man who was made Captain America with a super soldier serum before Captain America was ever made the super soldier. So while that's a bit of a complicated history to try and go in and explain how he's here and there and this age and that age and what time and era, blah, 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 I'm sure, I have no doubt they can pull that off. If they want to make him Isaiah Bradley, I'm sure they will be able to make him Isaiah Bradley. There's also been rumors of Zola returning, rumors of the Thunderbolts. Well, Zola was one I thought would be in WandaVision, and he's not. Rumors of the Thunderbolts forming as a team. We know General Ross and Abomination are going to appear in She-Hulk. It would be interesting to see if Ross appears and creates the Thunderbolts team before that. And then another rumor is the terrorist Flag Smasher might appear as a team. I don't know if I read that rumor correctly, but Flag Smasher might be a group of people who are terrorists, and the character Jolt, who is a Thunderbolts team member, may also be premiering in this series. If you watch the trailer, there is a young girl who they kind of joke about she's working with Zola, or possibly just on the same kind of side that Zola is. I'm not entirely sure what that character is, if that's supposed to be Ricky Barnes or one of these other rumored characters, but I know there's a lot of talk about her, and it'll be interesting to see who she pans out to be. To be completely honest, I am not the most familiar with Captain America comics. I had a guy one time find out that I was really into comic books, and he was obsessed with Captain America. He like had everything, all the merch, comic book, and I don't think movie. I think he was jealous that Chris Evans was so much hotter than him. No offense. But he was obsessed with Captain America, and when I told him I read comics, he legit came to my work and brought me a bag full of probably 25 comic books from his collection to keep, because he, I guess, wanted to impress me. I don't know. They were a lot of really old, shitty comics that didn't mean anything and weren't worth anything, but I'm not a really big fan of Captain America comics. I've never really found that draw. The movies, obviously, I think were way better than anything we've seen for him in the comics. And so I'm curious how Falcon and the Winter Soldier, maybe I'll start reading more Captain America stuff. I doubt it. But Falcon and the Winter Soldier, I'm obviously completely in for. The second Disney Plus Marvel TV series will be taken in a completely different direction than the first. And I'm all here for it. I am looking forward to this new era of superhero film and TV. It can only be a good thing. Wrapping up this, let's call it, segment on the MCU, we have some Spider-Man 3 rumors. Now, these have been going around for a long time. Of course, the rumors about all the different Spider-Men coming into the movie and all the different characters from the past Spider-Man films, the Tobey Maguire films, and Gwen Stacy and MJ, and all these people are supposed to be coming back, and really none of it's been substantiated. But we had another rumor this week that Willem Dafoe was supposedly seen on set to play Green Goblin in Spider-Man 3. Now, I don't know if it was confirmed that Willem Dafoe was even seen on set or what, but that's a kind of a fun idea. We obviously know everybody wants Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield to be in this movie, and the general theory is that it's going to be a giant Spider-Verse movie with multiple Spider-Men. I don't think it's going to be anything nuts. Before I go into that, though, I'll say Tom Holland posted that it was probably last week, I think, or earlier this week. Tom Holland posted that he just finished filming the biggest moment of his career. There's a picture with him and his brother, and I would say that's a very bold statement from what we normally see to be a reserved British kid. It was probably, if I had to guess, whatever the Spider-Man tidbit we're going to be getting in the movie with Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield, because I would say that that's what will probably be one of the biggest movies in cinema, possibly even including Endgame. I don't know, we'll see. Especially superhero cinema. Good lord, especially superhero cinema. That would be a huge moment. But when it comes down to it, I don't think we're going to see more of those characters aside from just a couple of scenes. Especially if Tom Holland is posting it saying it took a day. It seems it only took about a day to film or less. You can't film an entire movie in a day. So I think if it really is the Spider-Man, I definitely think that they're not going to be in it for very long, and it will be more of a they come in for a scene to help, or they appear separately in different scenes. I don't think we're going to see them for a very long amount of time in the movie. One other rumor that's kind of been going around, of course, Ned Leeds in the comics is the guy who turns out to be Hobgoblin. The actor who plays Ned Leeds in Spider-Man with Tom Holland, he is a very weighty guy, and recently, well, it's not really recent now, some time ago was noticed that he lost a hefty amount of weight. That was what really initiated the rumors getting some ground of they're gonna do the Hobgoblin storyline for Ned Leeds. That they put out something else earlier this week also. I'm not sure actually if it was fan made or if it was legitimate. I think it was legitimate, but it was something on Instagram where Ned Leeds was there, and it was kind of a journal style notebook thing where his photo was drawn over with a I believe it was a Hobgoblin hat, or it's supposed to be some kind of Hobgoblin hat, reference to a Hobgoblin hat at the very least. So it's starting to get a lot more ground that Ned Leeds is going to play the Hobgoblin by the end of his time in Spider-Man. Now, the latest rumor which came up today, which we're hearing, is that Keanu Reeves has been offered the role of Kraven the Hunter. Kraven the Hunter apparently has a movie in development, and we might see him kick that off in Spider-Man 3. really would love to see Kraven the Hunter aside from Tom Holland's Spider-Man, across from Tom Holland's Spider-Man. I feel like they would have an excellent dynamic pretty much no matter who you cast him as. I never really considered Keanu Reeves playing this character, but it's not such a bad idea. I don't recoil from it. And it falls a little bit within the realm of what they've been doing with other Spider-Man villains, casting them as fairly big actors already. So if they were to do that, it wouldn't really surprise me, and I would be pretty much okay with it. I feel like there are better choices probably, but then again, people thought that about, Heath Ledger and Joker, and we see how that turned out now. So I think it'll be okay. And then spinning out of MCU, we'll get into some more indie stuff here. Snowpiercer, the TV show, continues into season 2. I've caught up with episodes 1 and 2. It does seem to be going in a really good direction, a really exciting direction. I recommend the show. There are some false articles out there saying that the show is a spin-off of the movie. That is incorrect. It is a spin-off of the comic series, the graphic novels, and the movie is as well. The show does take a slightly closer approach to following along the source material than the movie did, but it still strays pretty far, kind of out of necessity. If you're gonna like any of the characters and kind of get to know them and like who they are, you couldn't really stick with what was in the comic. My favorite things that I've been taking from the comic so far, probably out of the whole thing, has been the music that was heard on the radio very briefly in season 1. I believe it was at the end of season 1 they heard music on the radio, and I'm not sure if that ended up being music from Wilford's Second Train or not, but when they hear music on the radio in the comic, the graphic novel, that is because it turns out that there is a place that they go to that has a base that they think there's going to be people in. Spoiler alert, there's not, and it's all like a lost cause. But that's an interesting thing. I think they put that in there from the comic. The fact that it's getting warmer, also from the comic. The second train from the comic, and the hints of the second train pulling them off the tracks to drive across the snow, which were very lightly dropped in the first season as well. Actually, it may have been episode 1 of season 2, whichever one it was. That is from the comic. The trains go off the tracks and drive across the snow. The characters who are appearing in the show are mostly original, because I don't think people would really get along with the characters from the show. And there's a lot more of them. You get a lot more depth into the people in the train and the society and the makeup of the society of the train. So that's pretty cool. It's a fun show so far. I would definitely recommend it. I think you can watch it all season 1 on Amazon or something. I don't know. Season 1 somewhere. I watched it. HBO. That's the one. You can watch it on HBO. Resident Alien is another comic book that has been made into a TV show. It is a lot closer of a, I guess you could say, copy than Snowpiercer. Even though Snowpiercer, the general idea is it's all there. Resident Alien is basically about a alien who crashes on Earth, meaning to destroy it, and kind of gets stranded, disguised as the local doctor to this very small mountain community, and helping them out with stuff kind of on accident while he's trying to get out of there. I started reading the omnibus a couple of days ago because I started watching the show. You can watch it on Sci-Fi's apps, on whichever program you're on. It's really good. The show is very funny, and I definitely think that while there are a fair amount of changes based around characters and but mostly just characters, I definitely think the changes they made are for the better. I can smell the Reddit dude bros getting mad about representation being added to a very white cast of characters, but again, I think it's all for the better. It allowed for some more development into certain characters that maybe don't get developed as much, as far as I've read in the comic at least. And it's really good. And of course, I cannot reiterate ever enough, I should shout it to the stars every day. Alan Tudyk is a blessing. He is one of my favorite actors. In fact, the whole cast of A Knight's Tale from 2001, I can't believe that was 2001, they're all a blessing. It was Heath Ledger, Mark Addy, Paul Bettany, Alan Tudyk, and Shannon Sossamon, and then Rufus Sewell was the villain. Rufus Sewell, he's a fantastic actor. all of those names, fantastic actors. And we all know Heath Ledger went down in infamy. Absolute, just phenomenal performers. And of course, A Knight's Tale had the classic, some of the best, quote, classic rock, unquote, songs that were ever made, set to a medieval setting. It was such a great film. Somehow it's really bad reviews online, so maybe it didn't age well. I don't know. I haven't seen it in a while. But Firefly was another one Alan Tudyk was in, and that also went down in infamy because it was canceled too soon and all that stuff. I would definitely say if you're a fan of Alan Tudyk or of any of the movies or films that he is, TV shows or films that he has been in, definitely check out Con Man. It's just Con Man. It's a joke, confidence man, yes, but also convention man. It's Alan Tudyk's crowdsourced show. It's basically about himself, a former cast member of a hit sci-fi show, Firefly, who goes to cons and just has, like, basically these miserable adventures at cons, meets all these guest stars and people who appear in the show, and it's really funny. Lots of inside jokes if you're into sci-fi shows. And of course, Nathan Fillion appears on it a few times, playing himself, the star of the show, Firefly, who made it big in a way that the other cast members didn't. So it's kind of like, it's a funny little joke on the whole, with the reality of Firefly getting big and Nathan Fillion getting big, and they're all kind of just run around doing cons, and all these sci-fi actors and TV show actors and movie actors, they all just run around and do all these cons. It's a very fun show. There's 2 seasons of it. I have seen the first season. It's been out for a good couple of years now, so definitely check that out online if you are a fan of Alan Tudyk or any of these kind of sci-fi shows and things. To wrap up the comics and media segment, I want to just mention that it's been, we just passed the 1-year anniversary for Harley Quinn and the Birds of Prey, which I'm not even going to try and remember what the fantabulous title of the first movie was. The original title of the movie was. It's honestly, this is one of my favorite superhero films. I think it's one of the best ones that have ever been made. And if you have an opportunity to watch the behind the scenes, I so recommend it. You get walked through basically why it's important to have women at the forefront of female stories. The team of women they had on this film were absolutely incredible. They have minds that are creative and stunning, and I can't wait to see what happens next. I think they have another project that they'll be coming out with. We know Margot Robbie, next time we'll see her, Harley Quinn, is going to be in Suicide Squad, which I can't believe it. They're doing what I literally, last time I watched, I was after Birds of Prey, I think I went on Twitter and I tweeted, okay guys, now we've seen this version of Harley, now we need to see Red and Black Harley, and dude, we're getting Red and Black Harley in James Gunn's Suicide Squad, which, reminder, will be premiering both in theaters and on HBO Max. For the people who don't really feel like doing theaters still, myself included, I don't really feel a big draw for them to begin with. But it's been a year since Harley Quinn and the Birds of Prey, and that movie I will hold near and dear to my heart probably forever, as being, oh gosh, should I say this? Probably the best female the best female cape movie they've made. Don't shoot me for saying that, but I think that's probably true. If you put into account Captain Marvel and Wonder Woman, that was probably easily, without a doubt, far and beyond the best female cape movie we've seen yet. And I hope we get better ones too. I hope it gets one-upped by something even better someday. So, Harley Quinn and the Birds of Prey, happy 1-year anniversary to that movie coming out. I should watch it again. I've seen it probably 4 or 5 times now, and I'm always finding myself wanting to watch it again because it really is just that good of a movie. Now we're going to go ahead and move along to the next big topic of the week. Of course, that would be comics that are coming out this week, starting tomorrow, Tuesday the 9th, and Wednesday the 10th of February. We'll start with spotlights and representation. It's not such a great week. I haven't picked out so many good ones. I apologize if it's a little bit lacking. But what I have pulled out, we have DC's Love is a Battlefield as their Valentine's Day special, and it includes at least one queer representation of a relationship, and that is, of course, as you, I'm sure, could guess, Harley Quinn and Poison Ivy. I just wish that DC would come out and make that canon in the main thing. If they keep putting out these little one-shots of them being together, they're together in Batman, The Adventures Continue, they're together in the Harley Quinn TV show, which I recommend to everybody who is over the age of, 16 or 17, probably? It's rated R, super R. And I wish DC would just come out and let them be gay in the comics for real together. I know we're having a little bit of Poison Ivy. She's now Queen Ivy. Fuck yeah. She's popping up in Catwoman, I believe in March and April, or possibly April and May. And I think it's April and May. Either way, I'm very excited to see if the Sirens are going to end up back together. Of course, the last time we saw Harley Quinn was in Tynion's tragic Batman. He cannot write her very well, and I'm glad to see she's getting a new series. I hope it's canon, because the last one wasn't. Moving along from that, Future State Justice League's Jesse Quick and Andy Curry are in some kind of relationship together. We know Jesse Quick being a non-binary Flash from another universe, and Andy Curry being the daughter of Aquaman and Mera. They're in some kind of relationship, and it's some kind of queer deal. I really hope that we see more of them. They're some of my favorite parts of this whole Future State thing. In Vampirella, we don't see it too often. Well, we've been seeing it more in Christopher Priest's run, I guess. Vampirella is hella pansexual. She will have sex with you if you're a man, woman, or beast. Daredevil, we have Chip Zdarsky doing one of the best characterizations of female superheroes. Oh, I guess you could say female anti-heroes. When we see Elektra as Daredevil, and we've seen her for a lot of the series before that, he just writes a stunning Elektra, and I am so happy to see a female character at the forefront of a superhero book. Then we have the Marguerites writing Superwoman. It is Marguerite Bennett and Marguerite Sauvage writing Kara Zor-El's Superwoman for Future State. It's issue 2 of 2. It's a very exciting thing. I love these two creators, and the fact that they're both working on this project is both very fun and very satisfying. And then finally, Mariko Tamaki is writing Dark Detective. It is part 3 of 4 coming out this week. Mariko Tamaki recently did a run on Wonder Woman, and I actually recommend more than that her run on She-Hulk and Hulk, which was a 2016 series, I believe. Leaving the spotlights on representation, let's talk about some things that I'm just generally excited for this week. The number one thing I'm looking forward to, believe it or not, is an indie comic. It is Bliss number 5 by Sean Lewis and Caitlin Yarsky. This is the return of Bliss. It finished issue 4, I believe, in November or possibly December. And I have been on the edge of my seat waiting for issue 5. This is easily one of the best ongoing indies. Excuse me, it's not ongoing, it's of 8. One of the best indie series going now. There will be 8 issues. It ties together our world and one that is much more imbued with fantasy elements in a very unique and interesting way. There's so much real world reality of what we see every day, of the darkness of homelessness and drug abuse and things like that. There's so much of that, but at the same time, you turn around and you get these intense fantasy elements all on the same pages. Caitlin Yarsky's art is phenomenal and unique. She hasn't done anything really in comics outside of work with Sean Lewis. They do have one other series together. It's, I always compare it to the art of Tim Burton style movies, but really, it has a little bit of that kind of dark, elongated caricatureness to it. Definitely the caricatures, very heavily symbolic features on the characters, and the kind of gothic dark outlines. She does a lot of oil painting. It's such a beautiful art style. She captures the feeling of the world completely perfectly and drives the story more than I think anything else would. I definitely recommend Bliss to people who are looking for indie series to read. It's got 4 issues out, and the 5th is coming out this week, and this is only going to be 8 issues, so it's not a big commitment. You get pretty good here. Over at Marvel, we have Eternals number 2. I was extremely impressed with what Kieran Gillen is doing with the Eternals. Not a person who was very familiar with them. Basically, where I was at with my knowledge of the Eternals before Eternals number 1 was pretty much just who they are, what they are, and their general role in the Marvel Universe. It was pretty generic. Eternals number 1, based on this one issue, which I hope the rest are going to be very similar to it. Kieran Gillen is doing with the Eternals what Jonathan Hickman is doing with the X-Men, or rather has already done with the X-Men. Is giving it a firm starting point for people of all knowledge levels to come and return to, and giving it so that there are changes in what he's doing for them minorly, but really what he's doing is making what was kind of created for them through the decades make sense in a modern way. So I'm super excited to see that. This week we have, it's going to be Thanos. We're going to figure out why Thanos is back. It's possible it has tied in to do with this weird realm thing that I won't get really into right now, but he's back. And then we're going to see Thanos probably in some Donny Cates stuff before too long. Donny Cates writing King in Black event right now, as well as Venom and Thor. And in one of the early issues, I want to say issue 3 of Thor, we had Thor seeing what he saw as the end of all things, which was Thanos holding a giant sword, I believe it was, it was a hammer, it was Mjolnir, I believe, which had the Infinity Stones embedded in it, and on his other hand, he had a silky black gauntlet, silky, like, fluid black, inky black gauntlet. And my theory, of course, on that image is that Thanos whoops Null's ass at some point here, either in King in Black or afterwards, and turns him into that gauntlet in some way, or possibly his power source into that gauntlet. I'm not really sure how any of that's going to happen, but it's Donny Cates and he loves to tie his stuff together. Like we know that Silver Surfer is going to show up in King in Black in this next issue, and it'll have to do a lot of the things that occurred with him in Silver Surfer Black, which was a Donny Cates thing. So Donny Cates loves to refer to his own writing. Moving on from him, though, Chip Zdarsky's Daredevil continues this week. I cannot talk enough about how much I love Elektra Daredevil. I can't get enough of it. I'm so excited to get absolutely every cover of it I can. I hope they make posters of her. I will buy those too. Marco Caccetto's hair that he draws Elektra, his whole art obviously is stunning, but the hair that he draws for Elektra is just something else. It is, every girl with curly hair has, like, at some point in her life looked at a woman with hair like that and gone, oh, I wish I had hair like that. I know, because I have curly hair, and then so I want hair like that. This issue is going to be like the last issue again, where it's split between Marco Caccetto's art and Mike Hawthorne's art. Mike Hawthorne's art covers the Matt Murdock pages in prison, and Marco Caccetto's covers Elektra's out doing Daredevil things. Since it is King in Black, they are doing King in Black type things, and at the end of the last issue, spoilers, once again, why are you listening to this if you haven't read the stuff? Spoilers is that Matt has been taken over by one of Null's symbiotes. Very, very cool thing of the symbiote kind of taking over Matt's head, and he can hear Null's voice, the god of the symbiotes. He can hear Null's voice in his head going, "What are you?" You know, Null is very interested in this blind man who can see more than anybody. And of course he would be. Could you imagine, what is symbiote Daredevil how are you gonna stop that? And also, of course, Matt, with his incredible religious backbone, now speaking to the god of the symbiotes, and he tells him, "I am God." And it's, Matt is having a major religious crisis right now in his head, while being taken over by this god of the symbiote. So you're gonna have symbiote Daredevil versus Elektra Daredevil, is what I'm guessing is gonna end up happening at the end of this. Really phenomenal stuff from Chip Zdarsky, as usual. I can't recommend enough of his work. Whether it's writing or drawing, Chip Zdarsky stuff I will pick up and read no matter what. At least the first issue. Moving on from Marvel to DC. I already talked a little bit about DC's Love is a Battlefield #1. Some of the other couples besides Harley and Ivy that are going to be in it is going to be Steve Trevor and Wonder Woman, which I cringe so hard at, because I do not like Steve Trevor as a character. I feel like Diana should be allowed to move on. And then Barda and Scott, Big Barda and Scott Free, who are probably my favorite couple in all of DC. Actually, let's just say they are my favorite couple in all of DC, easily. Again, none of these stories are canon. I don't know why DC loves to make these non-canon stories, but here we are. The last we know of Scott Free was actually dead, I'm pretty sure, at the end of the last Mr. Miracle series. And then we have the new Mr. Miracle in Future State and beyond, and I don't know if they're ever going to address where the hell Barda and Scott had a kid. Where are they? Anyway, so they'll be talking about that, and I just would like to briefly mention, if you are somebody who is a fan of Harley Quinn and Poison Ivy as a couple, so there's a lot of fans, Harley Ivy fans, who get very confused about what's canon and what's not. The only stuff that's canon for DC, for Harley and Ivy right now in the main DC universe, is that they're friends, who are, like, currently not friends even, because Ivy's pissed off at Harley, and Harley's kind of just doing her own thing, honestly. So, the Harley Quinn TV show, while that is a phenomenal TV show, and I recommend it to most comic fans, that is not something that is a canon relationship in the DC universe. It is canon within that show, yes, and this story will be canon within its own self, and blah blah. But unfortunately, yet DC has not made them canonly in a relationship in the standard DC universe. I'm waiting for that to happen. I would love for that to happen. It might be happening soon because of things that are kind of in the process with Poison Ivy and other series, but we'll see. We will see. And what that leaves is the Future State titles for the week that I'll be reading. It's just Dark Detective going over Bruce Wayne's situation in Future State. It's not my favorite of the two, to be honest, Batman books. I prefer John Ridley's The Next Batman. It also has more interesting side stories. But I like Marco Tamaki and Dan Mora's art, and I will be checking this out because I've got the first two, so I need to see how the story ends. And Future State Justice League #2, once again, Jesse Quick and Andy Curry are probably easily some of my favorite things that have come out of Future State. And I'm concerned because they're the two characters who I'm not actually seeing anything of post-Future State in Infinite Frontier. I always want to say Infinite Crisis because that's what we're used to talking about with DC. So hopefully those two characters we'll see more of. We'll see how their kind of like situation ends, I guess, here as Justice League. The whole modern era Justice League has been, I guess Future State era, we should say, Justice League has been kidnapped and replaced. And I imagine they'll be having to work together to get out of the situation, and that will probably mean telling each other their secret identities and being truthful and honest and, you know, setting a new era for their own team. Which, this team is easily, like, this is such a great team. We've only had a few pages of interaction between the members, but all of these characters have great dynamics. And they don't even know each other yet. So I feel like there's so much room to be done with this Justice League team. I hope they aren't just dropped at the end of Future State the way that I'm kind of seeing that happen. I would love to see more Andy Curry. She's more likely that we're going to get because of her parentage. But Jesse Quick, I would love to see their arrival in the DC Universe canon as well after Future State. And finally, of course, I mentioned it already, Kara Zor-El Superwoman #2. It finalizes the Marguerite series on Kara Zor-El post leaving Earth and living on the moon on a colony where she protects the people of the moon, people who live on the moon. The first issue was absolutely excellent. It showed the fullness of Kara's character. A lot of people kind of forget. She is compassionate and caring, yes, very much so, but she also holds a deep, deep rage and sense of being unfulfilled because she came to Earth to raise her young cousin. She arrived on Earth. He didn't need her. Earth didn't need her. You can imagine, they talk about a lot in the first issue. There's so much beneath the surface of Kara that I love they're talking about. And they touched on it also a little bit in the Supergirl TV show. I know a lot of people don't like that. I really, really liked that show. Especially the first few episodes had some absolutely brilliant writing about her anger in the whole situation that she's in. And that covers this week's comics. I think that is everything. I'm of course reading more comics than these. I'm reading several more, a lot more, things like Rorschach. But I don't want to talk about everything that I'm reading because that would take all day, and these are the ones that I'm really excited about talking about, so I figure I'll talk about them and stick with that. the last bit of comics news I want to talk about this Monday episode is how Marvel, I mentioned it a little bit before earlier in the episode, Marvel is redoing Heroes Reborn. In the 1990s, Rob Liefeld was given his own kind of Marvel universe to lead. It was a massive bust, so I think that titling it like this is going to scare off some readers. But we'll see. It's an interesting concept, at the very least. The solicitation, I'll read the important lines here, says, spinning out of their epic work on Avengers, Heroes Reborn will answer the question of what the Marvel Universe would look like if the Avengers never assembled. This exciting and unsettling ripple effect in the Avengers' absence has on the rest of the Marvel Universe will be explored in a series of one-shots starting in May. So there you go, it's at least just a series of one-shots. This isn't going to be something permanent. They're not trying to do their own New 52, although I was thinking about that the other day. How funny, I mean, like, not funny, but how funny would it be if Marvel tried to do their own New 52? Take everything back, restart it from day one, Peter Parker as Spider-Man, day one, the Fantastic Four, meeting Sue Storm, the Storm siblings meeting Reed Richards and everybody, whatever that might be, whatever they decide day one is going to be in these hero stories. Captain America joining up in the army for the first time, Black Widow leaving the Red Room, whatever, that would be so crazy. I would love to have them do that. Not in the main universe, maybe do like a side universe. And yeah, you're gonna say Ultimate Universe, but the Ultimate Universe was so toxic and bad in certain places. The best thing that came out of the Ultimate Universe was Miles Morales, and he's not even in it anymore. But, moving along, the series that we can expect, the one-shots that we can expect through Heroes Reborn 2021 include, but are probably not limited to, Hyperion and the Imperial Guard, Peter Parker, the Amazing Shutterbug, Magneto and the Mutant Force, Young Squadron, and Siege Society. Characters that you can expect to see here, I believe there was a Thanos crossed with somebody, there was Miles Morales crossed with Falcon, Nova crossed with some retro character whose name I honestly don't remember. I don't know who Ms. Marvel's crossed with because her suit looks awesome, but I don't recognize it. It looks honestly like Bumblebee from DC. The pattern, not the coloring, but so that's Heroes Reborn. That was my news bit of the day, of the week so far. I'm sure there will be much more news at the end of the week, especially as I read this week's comics. I'll be talking a lot about that at the end of the week, as I love to do. That pretty much wraps up this Monday episode. I think I've rambled on long enough now. We've covered all of the TV and movie talk that I wanted to cover, and then the comics that are coming out this coming week. Thank you for tuning in once again to Sensational She-Geek live from Yancy Street. My name is Anna. I am the Sensational She-Geek. You can find me on Instagram at AnnaWithTheComics. You can find me on Twitter at Savage She-Geek because sensational was too many letters. And then my website is sensationalshegeek.weebly.com. I normally write blog posts about what came out in the week and what is coming out in the next week. I'm sort of replacing that with this blog, with this podcast, kind of see how that goes for a while, see how we feel about that. If you have any need to contact me, if you would like to make comments or anything, please do so. You can find this podcast on Apple Podcasts, Podbean, and YouTube. I am trying to get it as accessible as possible to get it out there. Things that I talk about in this podcast tend to be the things that I covered in this podcast. I definitely try and keep it on terms of representation and feminism and things like that, because that's who I am as a person, and I would like to put that out there in the world and see more of it myself. So, being the example I would like to see. Please let me know what you think of this podcast, and I will see the next episode this coming Friday, the 12th of February, which will be covering the comics that came out in this week, and if there is any news at that point to cover, I will cover it then. Thank you very much once again for tuning in, and I will be back soon with a new episode. Stay sweaty.